Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host, Maqbool, with you at BTB World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at several important political developments in the country. Of course, many of that happened over the weekend, in which prominently we saw the BTI chairman also being arrested for the second time now, after the court also announced the verdict regarding the Toshakhana reference and found him guilty of corrupt practices and imprisoned him to 3 years jail sentence and also a rupees 1 lakh fine. This is important, especially in terms of the kind of impact it's going to have on the politics of the PTI and the future of the PTI chairman amid the vast amount of cases that are proceeding against him. And then, of course, the kind of dynamic that was then followed by the arrest previously on May 9th. We haven't seen, of course, any such similar incident coming through this time around, even though the PTI has called countrywide protests against his arrest. We also know that it has challenged the verdict in the Supreme Court today, and we're going to be able to see whether or not there is going to be a difference in this particular judgment. But what the court has earlier announced points towards that this is something that has been established beyond doubt, that he has been dishonest with regards to, of course, the way that he has declared his assets and the kind of false information that was provided. And then, of course, on the grounds that the ECP has put forward, it seems that according to the court, this is something that is irrefutable. And many previously have also claimed that the Toshakhana case is an open and shut case. But we're going to be trying and exploring it further, given the fact that there is, of course, a right to appeal. And moving forward, what exactly is going to be now the process in the Supreme Court, and how long will that eventually take, and what that means in terms of the kind of arrest that exists. At the same time, we also have seen that the political involvements with regards to the PTI internally are also taking place, with the vice chairman also now taking over the party. But there have been several reports of him also moving towards the core committee and establishing the fact that it is in fact the PTI chairman that will continue to hold ground in the party. At that, nothing is going to proceed unilaterally, and there will be collective wisdom that is going to be taken forward. However, many are still talking about whether or not his position may have been compromised regarding his loyalty towards the PTI as chairman. And so we're going to try and explore that even further as well, and what this means. At the same time, we also noticed just yesterday in the Tehsil Council chairmanship elections that PTI has secured victory in Peshawar. And this is important, especially in terms of the way that the dynamics have been presented previously in the emergence of different parties, and how exactly will that also then impact the upcoming general elections. Speaking of which, of course, we also know that the CCI has ratified the results of the new census, which means that now the delimitations are in order, and so this is going to be something that is eventually going to be part of the upcoming general elections. When will that be? Still a question mark, with the information minister also speaking about the dissolution of assemblies on the 9th, which is day after tomorrow, and then moving forward saying that the onus of conducting elections on time is then on the ECP, which should be under 3 months, but of course does not seem viable given the fact that new delimitations have to be in order. So we're going to try and explore all of these particular dynamics and try and understand where the country is heading and what sort of evolution will this now move towards. In our next segment, at the end of the show, we're also going to be taking a look at the Jeddah talks regarding the Ukrainian crisis, which have just concluded on Sunday, and under the leadership of Saudi Arabia, over 40 countries and their national security advisors and leaders came to participate in this dialogue, in which a number of suggestions have also taken place, and a number of positive engagements have come forward with all the different leaders and parties, stressing upon continuing peace efforts. What that may entail exactly in terms of tangible actions still, of course, is a question mark, and what sort of role will each of these countries be able to play in moving towards peace is something that we'll try and explore at the end of the show today. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analysts Farrukh, Pitafi and Faisal. We've also been joined online by Barrister Safi, Ghauri, who's a political analyst and legal expert. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being part of the show today. Let me start with you, Barrister Safi. Given what has happened over the weekend, of course, it's a very important case that we've been following for quite some time now, and a lot of the people have talked about the way that this case needs to proceed in terms of the kind of evidence that exists and how clear it may be. And this is something that we also see in the way that the judgment was also talked about. I want you to explain to us in terms of what has happened and in the way that the PTI chairman has been declared of corrupt practices. What exactly do you think is possibly any sort of avenue that can now be explored by the PTI in terms of their appeal, or do you think that the verdict stands clear?
Right. Thank you very much, Sana. Sana, the appeal is obviously going to be filed. There is absolutely no doubt about it. And there are several grounds of appeal which are somewhat correct. I would agree with PTI's stance, at least partially, in terms of certain procedures, such as, for instance, filing of witness lists, that perhaps could have been granted, wouldn't have been such a big issue. However, the judgment itself is very damning. If you were to read through the judgment, you would see that there is absolutely corrupt practices. So we have absolutely no doubt that there was at least certain amounts of corruption that was done. And I would like to quote at least two paras from the judgment itself, which
Sure.
I found to be quite surprising and shocking. In one para, the judge takes into account the returns that have been filed by the former Prime Minister Imran Khan in 2018, in which he declared his total assets to be four goats. Four goats, Sana. That's all he said he had. This was his tax returns, and that's
Okay.
hilarious. The judge also notices it with a lot of astonishment. And then another thing that the judge notices is the fact that his wife, Bushra Bibi's statement says that she has absolutely no jewelry whatsoever. And in a country like Pakistan, where women get at least a ring on their wedding days, to say that you are not in possession of any jewelry whatsoever is also astonishing. So the evidence itself is damning. There is no doubt about it. The problem only comes down to the way this evidence has been presented and the kind of impact that it would have on the legal system. But also at the same time, I feel there's something else that I want to shed light on, which is the fact that the evidence this time around is at least sufficient that the people themselves seem to be also somewhat convinced. We see that there are no mass protests this time around. There is absolutely nothing which suggests that either the last time all the protests were orchestrated, or the people did not believe in the arrest, or that this time people themselves are very disappointed and they think that Imran Khan truly was corrupt. And
Hmm.
there are people from PTI who have come on television saying, "Oh, it's because of state repression and because they're being stopped by the police." Well, this is not how political movements work. We have in our history in Pakistan, we have had People's Party become a proscribed organization, and the military actually pull out tanks against them, and yet they did not stop. We had Balochistan National Party and National Party which were physically bombed, and yet they did not stop. And then we have PTI, which seems to be worried that there's a policeman on the corner road and he's going to arrest them. And
Hmm.
I find it very surprising, Sana, because all the international news outlets, be it Al Jazeera, BBC, CNN, France Television, all of them are also reporting with a lot of surprise that nobody's coming out. So it shows that either the people have finally started respecting the court's judgments, or the last time around the people came about was an orchestration of PTI where people were forced to come out because there seems to be
Right.
no organic protest.
Right. And Barrister Safi, I believe Faisal might be in disagreement. Yes, Faisal.
Yeah, Barrister Safi, I have a question for you related to, of course, we are heading towards the Supreme Court to challenge. PTI is challenging this verdict which came out day before yesterday. Can we say that the whole process of the investigation, as you have highlighted, that there were certain points which we could not see, I mean, flourishing on the media before, just because they just went under some kind of garb or something, and nobody talked about that. I mean, these were the points, the one you were highlighting now. These were the points. There should have been programs over it, that
Yeah.
if Imran Khan just put four goats in, or
Yeah.
Bushra Bibi did not, put any jewelry
Irritated.
through, and all of these things, they should have been discussed previously on the TV channels as well. As we know that for the other politicians, this was the common practice. Can we say that once the case gets to the Supreme Court, and of course, whatever happens in Supreme Court, it becomes part of the evening shows as well. Can we say that the whole episode would be repeated out there, where everything in details is being discussed, or it would just be taken as a simple case of sort of reversing the judgment on certain lacunas which were left in?
I feel that, of course, if you're talking about the court procedure, the Supreme Court and the High Courts do not look at matters of fact now. From here onwards, they will only be looking at matters of law, which is to say the lacunas and the procedure that has to be followed. The facts are discussed in the trial court. Imran Khan was given an ample opportunity to present the facts. He was given a written questionnaire, which he answered. He was also cross-examined. Once again, I would like to bring your attention to what's been recorded in the judgment. It says in the judgment that when Imran Khan was asked about the various amounts that were transmitted into his bank account, he responded by saying that he is Pakistan's most popular leader, that he represents the true voice of people, instead of answering the question straight up about where the money came from. And the judge was recording these things in the presence of his lawyers. The judge also records that PTI has brought the maximum number of lawyers imaginable, close to 500 lawyers for this case. So we have plenty of witnesses from all sides, not just the Election Commission side, but also PTI side, which can attest to what Imran Khan said in the court. And as yet, as such, nobody, even from PTI's end, is disagreeing or saying that Imran Khan was not given a fair opportunity to speak in the cross-examination, or that he was not given a questionnaire where he was allowed to answer. These are issues of fact which I think are now water under the bridge. However, once again, as I stated earlier, there are clearly some procedural issues. The judgment does seem rushed, and this is going to be the death of it if it goes forward. And I do believe, of course, that the High Court and the Supreme Court would take cognizance of what this rush was. That much I would definitely agree with.
All right. Farrukh, another aspect of people not coming out on the streets, as Pastor Safi was talking about, of course, maybe pointed towards any sort of pressure that there may be from security personnel, or what sort of a reaction we have seen previously. But in terms of how different leaders from the party, and then, of course, the emergence of new parties, and then moving forward in terms of what we see today, a kind of lack of public support that previously perhaps was enjoyed by the PTI chairman, it's still sort of in contradiction in what has happened in Peshawar, for example, just yesterday, in terms of the kind of popularity that exists perhaps still there. Do you think that this is something that that is evident of how strongly PTI is still being followed or has as a voter base in the country, or do you think that it shows something else?
Right, Sana. Thank you very much for this question. I wanted to actually reflect on what was said earlier as well. Given that our media has been covering this event since the former Prime Minister's arrest, since then there are some people who keep on actually, taking out the Mickey out of the former Prime Minister. So I'm not one of those people who would actually make light of somebody's suffering, regardless of who that person is. But I think that at this moment there is an understanding, at least in former Prime Minister's mind, that he has to cooperate with the system. Without cooperating with the system, all this build-up and anxiety against him is not going to go away. So if he has to cooperate, that means that he will have to actually follow the law, subject himself to the law. And then even if he's in prison, for example, today their lawyers met him, right? And there wasn't, they spoke about the size of the cell and other things, but there wasn't any physical, harm that was posed to him, any threat of that kind of harm. So that would actually allay a fear in his mind as well, that somehow something might happen in jail. I think jail in current situation is safer than his own house, right? Having said that, today I was thinking that had he not followed, or PTI actually not followed extremely rotten advice, even today the Punjab government and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa government would have belonged to PTI, right? And they would have been in existence, and they would have continued to be in existence till the time dissolution of all assemblies in the country. He would have been given a lot of protocol, because if you remember at that time in Punjab, what was happening was he was sitting in Lahore, but he had a police security or safety coming from Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and he let all those things go, threw them out of the windows, right? And today PTI is facing the consequences. So while I think at the start that they might have actually learned something, but today their lawyers actually doing what they were doing actually proved me wrong. Why? In the past, for example, in this case where the judge was changed, they kept on attacking the previous judge and defaming him. Eventually, he was replaced, right? Now, if you think that somebody else is going to come and he is going to be an ideological stalwart or supporter of PTI, that is not going to happen. It is, a court of law. So the new judge came and he actually accelerated the process, and eventually you got what you were fearing. Now today when they come out, the first thing they do is they attack the IHC, Islamabad High Court's Chief Justice. This is the same kind of stupidity that we have been seeing over and over. Even if you replace him, is there any guarantee whosoever actually is there will do what you like? I don't think so, right? So they are, I know that you were earlier talking about many cases against the former Prime Minister or Chairman of PTI, but I believe that there are 4 or 5 cases in total that can actually take him to prison or totally damage his political career. Tosha Khana is one, May 9th is another, then various others that you have been following. Sorry?
Foreign funding?
Foreign funding is one. Yeah, there are 4 or 5 that are really serious. So those can actually, and Cypher is also one of them, right? These can actually burn down his career. But at this moment, he has just begun cooperating with the system. So all those people who are trying to actually make any office controversial are not helping him at all. Regarding what happened in Peshawar, look, there are 2 things. I have always believed in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. PTI has a lot of strength, right? But you cannot actually take up one election, one tehsil election, and then think that it is going to be the trend in the country. The biggest problem at this moment with our people, with our pundits, is that they keep on actually dancing around the main issues and they don't address them. They don't have the kind of data that is needed. We don't have that kind of opinion polls. We don't have exit polls. We don't have the primary data to focus on. So what we do? We keep on projecting our own wishes onto numbers, and that's why whenever an outlier actually arises, people start saying that this is exactly what is happening in the entire country. I don't think so. Regarding the protest on that day when he was arrested, why was there no commotion? And that actually surprised me as well until I started thinking about what actually brings or who actually brings protesters to such events. If you remember on May 9th or before that as well, it was order of the party that all people who are actually wielding the party's tickets should bring as many as possible people to protest, right? Right now, most of them don't want to contest from PTI's tickets. And there are many people, as you rightly pointed out, have actually either left the party or thanks to these audio leaks that you keep on listening, they are going to leave very soon. So with that kind of situation in mind, I think there could be 2 explanations. One, that PTI did not want protesters to come out. Actually 3. The second one is that you mentioned there is some fear. The problem is if you want to come out and protest peacefully, nobody can stop you, regardless of what happens. But that did not happen. I think that it is not the first part either, that it was voluntary decision that they don't want to protest. So what exactly is it? I think that in Pakistan's politics, most electables are still, once again, they are weighing their options, and that's why they are not as committed, and that's why you haven't seen the kind of people who have come out or who would come out.
All right, so that means that perhaps the kind of public sentiment that is spoken about regarding towards the PTI chairman does not really exist.
Right, that depends on how actually you look at it. I suppose you were asking me, right, Sana?
Yeah.
Okay. The biggest thing about Punjab is that Punjab's politics has always been establishment or pro-establishment, politics in the country. It is the most populous province in the country, and you have seen the history. Repeatedly, people who are closer to establishment have been elected there, right? What does it tell you about the people of Punjab? It tells you that they are prudent. that they actually realize that their interest lies in being on the right side of the state, and that will continue. In Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, of course, because there has been PTI has been ruling for almost 10 years, there was this lash out that was possible, that there is going to be some kind of holding power of PTI, but elsewhere I don't think that is there. So sentiment might be there, but will it propel you or I to actually go and start protesting? I don't think so.
All right. And Faisal, we were just talking about how the PTI chairman has started cooperating, but I want to understand what you think may be the reason behind that. Is it because this is part of a strategy, or because he has no choice left? And then moving forward, whether or not this cooperation can possibly lead to any sort of avenue in his involvement in the political arena much more than it is today?
Sana, to me, I think PTI chairman, since a year and a half, he had a very weak kind of think tank around him. People whom he was listening to and whom he was making decisions out of. I think.
Could you identify them?
No, I can't.
Why not?
I think they were not politically mature enough. And slowly and gradually
What about the decision maker himself?
Yeah, decision maker himself, he kept on, since long he's been saying that he's not a politician, he's not a politician.
Yeah, but he's 70 years old,
he's a leader,
and he has experience of lifetime.
And here, the important thing is, I think with time, he has realized his mistake. To me, this is what it feels like. Whatever happened in May, he does not want to repeat it, because he knows that the outcome would be that people would go against him like they went in May. So he does not want to repeat it, and he does not want to lose further support which he used to claim that he has. And after May, we know that some of the support he had, he lost it. And one astonishing thing for me is that for a year and a half, obviously chairman of PTI, he kept on claiming that his life is in danger, and that is why he does not want to be, give up. And he did not give up, and he did not, present himself to the police or anyone who had the warrants against him. Now he is inside a jail since day before yesterday, and nothing has happened to him. His attorney, he met him today, and he was all fine, and he did tell him that he is having food and all of the things which he require, he is getting that. So there is, with time, he has realized that whatever the things he was highlighting for a year and a half, they were just mere statements.
In 2 days of jail, he's realized that now there's no longer any threat?
No, I'm not saying since 2 days he realized it. I think since post-May, he has realized it, that he has made the wrong statements, he has made the wrong options he was faced with, he has clicked the very wrong options.
But he never changed his statements. He kept on giving the same statements repeatedly.
No, slowly. To me, I felt like slowly he is sort of, calming it down, and that's what we have been, talking about it. That things should calm down in Pakistan.
Right. Let me bring Barrister Safi in the discussion as well, and like your take on that as well, Barrister Safi, and add to that the way that now we see the PTI vice chairman's involvement in the party as well, and given the kind of questions that perhaps are raised in terms of whether or not he's going to be also following the kind of party leadership that the current PTI chairman exercised, and the way that he's going to still take forward the instructions or the court committee's directions that perhaps have been there under the current PTI chairman, or will he make his own route moving forward?
So just before that, I'd like to, of course, agree with everything that was said earlier by both the wonderful analysts, Pitafi Saab and Raja Saab. Imran Khan had a massive problem. He continued to believe that he was the only one running the party. In fact, only recently, he issued a statement saying that even if I select an electric pole, khamba was the exact word that he used, if I nominate khamba to be my party representation in a constituency, that khamba would get voted into power. And this kind of shows the disregard he had for his own constituency leaders. which is what we are seeing now, that none of them were able to, nobody came out on the streets. There's nobody who's supporting him, nobody who's going out for him, because in front of those very people, he continued to demoralize them, continued to tell them that you mean nothing, and I could, select maybe even like an electric poll, and that would win over you. This behavior is something that has a far-reaching impact on the party, and of course, then this would have an impact in the same manner on the mindset of the party leadership, who would continue to believe that Shah Mahmood Qureshi, even though he may now be the leader, holds no real value. And even though Shah Mahmood Qureshi, it appears to me at least that Shah Mahmood Qureshi has declared himself to be a party leader. I don't see any other leaders who have stepped forward and said that he is in fact the rightful second in command. He himself just stepped forward, said that I am the second in command. It's obvious that he is completely toothless, because so far it's been 2 days. He has not given a single call for protest for his beloved leader. And the reason he has not given a single call is because he knows that nobody will listen to his call. He knows that he does not even have the support of the top PTI leadership, which will continue to back him up and say, yes, if Shah Mahmood Qureshi says so, then you should do so. And that's the real problem. Now, everything said and done, I do, of course, want to point out that Shah Mahmood Qureshi is a leader who is in age and in experience more senior to Imran Khan. And he is in fact senior enough to be the leader of a political party on his own. But PTI is not a political party. For me, it was always a one-man cult. Everybody always knew that PTI stood for no ideology. It only stood for one man's personality. And that's a major reason why, no matter who comes in, be it Shah Mahmood Qureshi, be it Asad Umar, whoever is next in line, nobody stands a chance, because people just want to see Imran Khan. They don't want to see anyone else. So really, it's unfortunate that there was no second tier, no third tier leadership. It's unfortunate that PTI does not have a workers' culture where people would step forward. And that's one of the major reasons why we see PTI crumbling faster than any other political party has in the past. People's
Barrister
Party.
Safi, Barrister Safi, I have a confusion, and I know you can, simply brush it off. That is, of course, we know that Imran Khan, he's been, handed with 5 years of disqualification on the basis that he's been
5 years.
He's been convicted of wrongdoing, obviously corrupt practices. That is 3 years imprisonment and 1 lakh rupees as a fine. So can we say that once it gets to the Supreme Court, all 3 at once can be removed, or we can say that he can be set free, and Supreme Court can say that they need to further probe whether he was doing the corrupt practices or not?
Right. So I'll explain. So what we have is 2 different things. He's been disqualified because of the conviction. If his conviction is removed, then his disqualification will automatically go away. However, if his conviction is maintained, but the sentencing in the conviction can also be changed by the superior courts. So the sentencing in this case was 3 years jail imprisonment and 1 lakh rupees fine, and if that is not paid, then another 1 year jail imprisonment. So the sentencing itself can be changed. His conviction can be maintained. It can be brought down. It can be brought down to 1 minute. It can even be set aside. It can even be said that his sentence was too harsh. No jail sentence. Maybe just 1 lakh rupees fine. Maybe not even that. Maybe like 10 rupees fine. But the fact remains that as long as he is a convicted criminal, he will still be disqualified. So unless and until his conviction is set aside in an appeal and he is acquitted, it is said that he did no wrong to begin with. Only then can his disqualification now.
Yeah, that's why we have a precedent in which, obviously, as you have earlier mentioned, 1 minute of sentence is enough to disqualify somebody. We know that one of the Prime Minister
actually until the rising of the court, and that was like very soon.
Yeah, very soon.
And Barrister Safi, you think that is unlikely that that is going to change the conviction?
This is a very difficult question for me to answer at the moment. I feel like, because I feel in my opinion, what's most likely going to happen is that it's going to go to an appeal to the High Court, and the High Court will remand it back to the trial court and ask for them to rehear after allowing for a list of witnesses and other matters, and that new trial then could last a very long time, maybe 1 year, maybe longer. But in the meantime, I am absolutely certain that he will get convicted in one of the bigger and more important cases that have already been mentioned: the foreign funding case, the Al Qadir Trust case, the Cipher case.
Yeah.
A conviction is definitely coming in those. That's
And Barrister Safi, meanwhile, we know that a barrister, a lawyer from Lahore, she has already put obviously an appeal in Supreme Court. And if Supreme Court, obviously being the Supreme Court, it decides against the first verdict, then what would happen to anything in higher court?
And clarify for me, Barrister Safi, that if the trial goes on longer and irrespective of whatever happens in other cases, will he then stand not disqualified and be able to take part in the elections if they happen in that time period?
Absolutely. So if he is acquitted on time, then of course, by the very act of him being acquitted, it would mean that his conviction in itself was wrong, incorrect, and therefore his disqualification would also disappear and be void of issue. So that's the answer to your question, Sana. Regarding what Faisal Saab just said, so the appeal to the Supreme Court is regarding some procedural errors. Once again, it's very likely that the Supreme Court would not interfere by acquitting the accused. They would likely send it back to the trial court and say, do it with the correct procedure. And once again, the only problems in this entire trial that are being so far pointed out by the PTI leadership is the procedural issue. It's the rush of it. It's the not allowing the filing of the witness list. In fact, I am yet to see legal reasons which state something along the lines of where the judge erred when it comes to the merits of the judgment itself. That's something that I'm in fact looking forward to hearing, and I haven't seen it yet.
Right. Thank you very much, Barrister Safi, for joining us and, of course, letting us pick your brains. When we talk about, Farrukh, this current situation and also in terms of what is happening now by the CCI's ratification and the way that the results of the new census will be taken in, I understand that the current political parties ruling the country have talked about how now the onus is on the ECP to conduct elections within these months. But it also, of course, means that it may be something which is perhaps not feasible and not possible in ways that we can expect in terms of the delimitations involved. In terms of what is happening simultaneously with reference to the PTI chairman and the way that different cases are now going to evolve, and especially in terms of his disqualification, and then moving forward with the elections, do you think that there is going to be any sort of way that perhaps people are going to see the trajectory of both these events together?
Right, Sana. I think regarding the CCI's decision, which actually had representation of more or less all the ruling parties, right? Whenever the ruling parties actually say that now it is ECP's job, they are right, technically correct. But the fact is that they have also, in principle, themselves actually handed out that power to ECP, right? They approved the census, they notified the census through CCI, and that means that now it is incumbent on the country to hold the elections according to the new list, according to the new numbers. So whatever the consequences, we'll have to wait and see. And the biggest problem with Pakistan's speculation is that with politicians also inhaling a lot of propaganda coming from media, and media having no clue whatsoever, what happens is that there is too much noise, too little signal. The signal would be to actually seek clarification from ECP, its assessment of how much time it needs, so that we have a finite number. And then you say that according to this finite number, okay, if there is a delay, it is 2 months, 2.5 months, 3 months, that is also taken into cognizance, right? Instead of actually just ranting about it, that won't help at all. Now regarding the Chairman PTI's litigation and cases, I just wanted to actually point out a few caveats. One, when Barrister Safi was talking about it, I just wanted to point out that absence of people from streets does not automatically mean absence of support through the ballot box, right? This is very important to understand. I don't think the numbers are as high as the media keeps on speculating, but it doesn't mean that the support has gone away. The second correction or caveat is about what Faisal Saab was just saying, and that actually shows you what is wrong with PTI's legal approach as well. Faisal Saab every time would talk about Supreme Court, Supreme Court, Supreme Court. There are four legal avenues available for redressal of grievances by PTI's, legal team. One, the very same court, but with different constitution through review, right? The second one is Islamabad High Court. The third one is Supreme Court. And finally, it is, of course, when all things are said and done, then the president can also waive the charges off, and that can also happen. So the problem is, why not exhaust every forum possible? And that actually shows you, because PTI thinks, or especially their lawyer, and I don't know why the same team would continue to actually advocate for PTI's chairman, because the kind of arrogance that was on display, that we are not even going to go to this court, right? We are just going to make a mockery of it.
Yeah.
We'll keep on objecting to the judges, and then we will always try to go to Supreme Court and ask them, help us out, help us out. That way you destroy all the bridges.
Right.
Because if there is any like-minded person in Supreme Court, they come under pressure. Likewise, President of Pakistan, he comes under pressure also. The best thing possible at this moment is to cooperate with the system. I think whatever build-up there is of animus, it will continue for 2 years, right? This is my assessment. I can be wrong. That means past this current electoral process. But once you actually take yourself off the menu list, once you actually take yourself off the top list for against anybody, right? Then you don't become a priority. You don't remain a priority. Somebody else becomes a priority. And that is how our previous political parties have been coming back into power, because they allowed the system to get it out of the system, right?
Right.
And that is unfortunately when it comes to PTI, and I totally agree with most of our guests here, that PTI's political system is such that minus IK, who is the chairman of the party, everyone else is in a colosseum system. That means you practically keep on undermining each other's authority, and that's why you become beloved of the leader, and that means that when the leader goes away, nobody is there to actually command support of the common man or even the party's rank and file. And that will be bad for the party.
Right, absolutely. We're now going to be talking about the Jeddah talks, which is of course also something that we want to look in, especially in terms of the way that the crisis has evolved for quite some time now, and we haven't really come close to any sort of solution. And Faisal, even in this particular meeting of the national security advisors of 40 plus countries, there were a lot of discussions and suggestions towards what sort of outcomes may there be in terms of continuing peace efforts, but not really any sort of tangible direction. And I can understand that from a conference or a 2-day gathering in terms of what exactly needs to be done. It's not going to be an easy solution. But do you think that they will be eventually able to move in a direction that actually helps the crisis?
Direction, from such kind of talks, I always expect a sort of a roadmap that can actually put us all towards, a tangible peace, a sustainable peace. And of course, in this situation, the Ukraine crisis, throughout the world, obviously the third world is the biggest hit. Why? Because there are food shortages, there are energy shortages, there are, food prices are, there is a hike, and of course, prices are, breaking the roofs, and they just, the situation is very bad in Africa as well right now. And I think whatever Saudi Arabia is doing right now, it would have a huge importance for Saudi Arabia as a key player in the region as well. And for the matters of the world, of course, Saudi Arabia is playing an excellent role, and that's how it should be. We know that Turkey tried to do it, then China tried to bring both the Ukraine and Russia closer to each other, but it was not done at that time. Now is the time. And now we know that since last year, Saudi Arabia, it has become very important for many other countries, including China and Russia and rest of the world as well. But they have made their presence felt throughout the world, and I think if this goes well, I am seeing Saudi Arabia gaining an excellent sort of position on the global arena.
Right.
And at the same time, to me, I think all of the problems world is facing right now is just because a huge chunk is to do with the Ukraine crisis, and Ukraine war must be over, and somehow Ukraine plus Russia, they must realize that they need to sit and talk and come out of it now.
Right, and I want to understand, Farrukh, whether or not this gathering of 40 plus countries is helpful in terms of the kind of numbers that it poses, given the fact that previous efforts haven't really amounted to any sort of a way forward in which there is a peaceful direction coming through.
Right.
And if putting together these different countries together at one platform is going to make any sort of difference in that.
Actually, Sarah, it is going to make a difference,
Okay.
and I tell you what, we keep on actually looking at the end result, right? And of course, we have the obsession with the big picture that the end should, the war should end, and that there should be peace, and before the assault or the start of the war kind of status quo. That will take some time because the system is stuck, and I tell you how long will it be stuck. Until the US elections next year take place, until that time it will be stuck because there are two minds in America, and because of that the entire world order is confused, right? Because both are saying different things. One is pro-Putin, the other one is pro-Biden, and of course I consider it two world orders, Putinian and Bidenian, right? So that will continue. But there are two or three things that are very important. Faisal mentioned, Turkey's role. Turkey's role was important because it was not merely about end of war, but ensuring that the world actually keeps on getting the supply of grain, right? And the biggest problem, at that time it achieved results, and that was great news, but that has fallen apart with the Russia actually quitting the Black Sea grain deal, and after that there are two things that have happened. One, the possibility of food shortages around the world, because Russia is now actually pounding those ports of Ukraine which actually send out the grain, right? So that is going to create a crisis. The second one is the ominous talk of nuclear deployment or use of nuclear weapons. We know that Belarus has already received the Russian contingent, and that could also be deployed. So with that kind of situation, it is important to ensure that the world system at least has some restraints, that we don't go totally bonkers, totally crazy. We don't go nuclear. We don't actually starve to death, especially he was talking about Africa. But there are other parts. Middle East is also very important, which includes, by the Saudi Arabia as well, and which includes UAE as well.
Right.
So with all that in view, I think it was a great initiative. It will take some time to build up momentum, but 40 countries coming together actually shows that the leadership of MBS, and I keep on saying this, MBS and MBZ, these two gentlemen are really visionaries, and they are going to transform the region. Faisal was talking about, once again, the bigger picture of obsession with the globe. My concern is there is no global order anymore. It is all regional. So these two countries actually reforming themselves, and while reforming themselves, also playing an important role is also helpful.
Okay.
That would mean that people don't starve. That means that there won't be any nuclear war. So I'm very optimistic. Something eventually, because 40 countries have actually shown conviction, this then goes to UN also. And there will be some kind of pressure on both sides to ensure that people don't go for nukes and people don't starve.
Right. Thank you very much, Farrukh. Thank you, Faisal, for joining us and being part of the debate. That's all we have from the show. We'll see you tomorrow.